What's up everyone? In this video, I want to try and tackle a pretty common issue when it comes to learning chess, or at least trying to improve at chess, which is really getting a good understanding of your openings. And that includes knowing the theory behind them, what moves to play, as well as the long-term ideas and plans of your openings, using this specific concept that I really like called anchor games. This concept I'm using the terminology from a YouTuber, Andras Toth. He made a really good video on, I think he used Benoni as an example or something like that, but I'll leave a link to his video in the description. First though, I kind of want to explain why I find anchor games to be important, and even before explaining the specifics of what they are and how to find them and all that stuff. So first, I wanted to take an opening that I kind of know. Let's say there's a line in the Scotch Gambit, or we first start with the Scotch. Let's say I know all these moves, and there's this line d6, and then let's say takes, we're developing, castles. And let's just look at this position right here. Now, I know I'm better. This position's like plus 0.6, plus 0.7 when you check the engine. And you can tell why this pawn is further advanced than this pawn, where it has a lot of control over the center. This bishop's pretty bad, stuck behind its own pawn, stuck behind the knight, so you need to take some time to improve the piece. White has a bit of a lead in development, but to be honest, it's not that much better. And even from this point, it's not the clearest as to how white should proceed, how white should press their advantage. For example, something that may seem very simple is okay, where do you put the bishop? And maybe you're like, okay, well, you put the bishop on e3. Well, sure, you can put the bishop on e3, but you're not necessarily sure of what it's doing. Are you supporting the center? What happens after knight g4? And you're like, okay, maybe play bishop d2. And then you're going to move this knight and go bishop c3. That's another option. That seems also very viable. Maybe bishop f4, just to control the center. Maybe bishop out to g5. And you want to put pressure here. Maybe you want to take, maybe not. Maybe you want to develop it on this diagonal and either play a3, b4, or try and play b3. And so already we've come up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different schemes of development specifically tied to just this bishop. And maybe you don't develop it. Maybe you leave the bishop here. You just do other stuff. You bring your rook here, bring your queen out, and you just relax, take some space. I don't know. So I feel like even though I know the opening up to here, if I've never seen how this is supposed to be played, I've never actually looked at a game, then I can't necessarily know how I'm supposed to proceed. And this is where I feel like having an anchor game is really important, where you have a game in mind that you've seen played by a master, and then you can use that and apply it when you get similar positions to this or this exact opening. One trap I see a lot of players fall into, and also I see happen to me, is where you think that, oh, the more theory you know, the more you understand an opening. And I feel like that's something that is really not the case. Regardless of how much theory you know, you're going to end up in a position and you're going to need to know how to play the position. It doesn't matter if all the theory you know is e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, bishop c5, castles, like this. It doesn't matter if this is all the theory you know. If you understand the position, then you should be playing it, you'll play it fine. And you'll probably play quote-unquote theoretical moves just naturally because you understand the position. Whereas I actually have a great example of this. This is a line that I learned that I would be terrified if someone actually played this in tournament, because I'd be blitzing out all of the moves and then we'd reach the resulting position and I would have no idea what to do. So it's a line in the Sicilian, nice dragon Sicilian. You gotta love the Sicilian. Queen d2, castles. Already this is a decent amount of theory, but nope, it continues. Takes, bishop here, there, bishop here, bishop e6, knight e4, rook e8, h4, h6, g4, queen c7, uh, g5, h5, bishop c4, rook ed8, queen f2. All this is theory. You'll see there are a few games in the database. A little over 100 games in the database. All this is wonderful theory. If you asked me to play this in an over-the-board game, I would refuse. I wouldn't refuse, because there's not really much else that I can do. I don't know other lines. I can't really deviate from this. But I'd be terrified, because I don't understand this position. I don't know what I'm supposed to play. Like, okay, let's say black attacks on the b file. Am I supposed to play b3? But then what about the pawn pushing? Do I play a3? Do I play bishop a3? I don't know. Do I want to trade? What pieces do I want to trade? Do I want to trade queens? Do I want to trade rooks? Where am I playing? Do I play in the center? Do I still have an attack that I can go for? All these are questions I do not know the answer to. You could ask me the theory in a bunch of different lines of the dragon, and I promise you I have looked at a decent amount of dragon theory, but if you put me at the end of a bunch of my theoretical variations just like this one, I would be like, I don't know. I guess I remember there's an idea of like you trade this for this at some point. Maybe you lift the rook. Like, I wouldn't be able to give you much. And so you can't really be fooled into thinking that, oh, just because I know a lot of theory and I can rattle off a bunch of moves really quickly, that I understand the position. And I keep mentioning, oh, you should have an anchor game, you should use an anchor game for this and that. But like, what specifically is an anchor game? And the way I define it is it's a model game between two strong players, or it could be just one strong player, but generally you want it to be between two strong players, where the main ideas and plans of your opening are shown working. And hopefully you can see how it'd be important to have a model game that you're actually looking at, where, for example, let's say I have a model game. If I just check the opening book and I just pick one at random, this one right here, Abdusattorov, I don't know the player who's playing as black, but I know Abdusattorov, a very strong player, been doing very well recently. And I'm looking and I see, okay, he played rook e1 here, and then he played h3, and then he played the knight in, and he played bishop e3. And I'm like, okay, maybe this is a viable development setup, where you just play rook e1, you play h3, maybe to prevent the knight from coming in here, and then you play bishop out to e3. And so that's one option. But then if we go back to the original position, we can see, okay, some people played h3 here, some people took, some people played bishop f4, some people played f3. But importantly, I feel like just having even one game in this position, or from this position, you can really get some understanding of the line that you wouldn't otherwise. Like, if I'm looking at this position, no help, no nothing, I'm like, okay, I guess I'll develop maybe here, queen d2, queen d3, I don't know. I'd have to figure out a lot of this over the board. If I'm playing like a blitz game, for example, that's taking up a lot of time. This is very early in the game. Like, this isn't a critical position or anything, but that would take a lot of time to make the decision. If I'm playing a classical game, it's important to know where I'm going to put my pieces. For example, let's say I play this plan of bishop d2. Like, of course not right now, this knight's hanging, but maybe I'm like, okay, let's go takes in here. And then, like, maybe there's some d5 stuff. Maybe that's not good. Maybe my opponent plays a5, bishop a6, and that's not good for me. And like, I don't really have a sense of what the setup's supposed to be. And so I can get lost very quickly. Not lost as in like getting a losing position, even though I think that takes bishop d2 is pretty bad. But lost in the sense of not understanding what I'm doing, finding my pieces to be misplaced, and like really just having a not fun time. Like, I'm not having I say not having a fun time. It's more like I'm not getting to play the game in the way I'd want. I'm not playing on even footing with my opponent. Let's say my opponent knows the line, then I'm just kind of on my own, floundering, whereas they may be like, they've looked at stuff and so they're confident. They've seen how top players are supposed to play this. So they've seen how really strong players try and play from both sides, so they understand the ideas. And so you want to be the one who has that upper hand, or even just to be able to play on an even footing with someone who has prepared this and has understanding of the position beyond just what they can figure out over the board. Now, one important thing that I feel like I used to have a lot of issues with and I can see a lot of people having issues with, is how to actually find anchor games or these model games from top players in your opening. And I feel like there are three main ways that I've seen. One that I think is really good and two which aren't as good. The first is with chess.com, where we go here to learn openings, explore openings. And from here, you can just start playing some moves of an opening. Let's say, again, I'm playing the same line. Knight c6, d4, takes d4, bishop c4, d6. Let's say here. And then I can click view games from current position. And over here I can make some specifications. Let's say white wins all of the games. Let's say, or I guess search. And then I can sort by the rating of the white player so I can have strong players. And we can see here, okay, we have a game by Emanuel Lasker, game by Paul Morphy, the game we were just looking at before. And issue right here is we're seeing that a lot of the players is black because of how old these games are, like their ratings aren't posted. This one has two very strong players, so this could be a very good game to look at. But yeah, you can just look through. This line isn't super common, but you can see that there are some very strong GMs who've played this. So this is your first option. I'm not really a big fan of chess.com by itself, mainly because when you're not a premium member, like you can see how I can just keep clicking lines or keep clicking moves and I get to go further and further into the line. However, when you're not a premium member, like the line ends quite early. Like I think you'll probably end around here or something, or just in this general area where you're not really getting as far into the line as you maybe want. So that is the one downside of chess.com, but this is a very good way of finding games. The second way is what I was doing before. You can see I was going through the game. I think I was going through it here. Yeah, I was going through the game on Lichess, and then you can see that it has the opening explorer and it has some top games from this position. And so you can just look through here and see games where white won. Like, okay, we have the one from before, we have this one, and you can try and use specifically these to kind of have a candidate for a model game or an anchor game. My issue with this is, even though, like you can see, it says there are 267 games from this position, you're only getting a short list, and you can't like filter by white winning, and so you do get a bunch of games which you maybe don't want, where black's winning a lot of these. And so I find that not being able to have access to all of these games and not being able to filter or sort in any way is a bit annoying. The best one that I think exists for anchor games is chessgames.com, just because it's very flexible. First, you can go to openings up here, and I've noticed that how far you can go into the line varies opening to opening, but you can generally go pretty far, or at least you can go until there's a point when like there are only like a few hundred games in a specific line, like when things are quite specific. And so even just that, like I feel like even if I think I checked it before, and I guess not this line, but I checked before in incognito to see what it was like for if you don't have a membership, and you still get pretty decently far into lines. Like one line I was looking at, you get to move 7, another you get to move, I think it was 14 in one of the, I was checking a dragon line. So it does depend on the specific line, but you can still go pretty far. Alternatively, you can go here and you can try and specify a player. Like let's say you just want to play the Scotch, and you know that Karpov plays this, or not Karpov, Kasparov plays the Scotch, or he's played the Scotch a few times. So you can do is you can find his name, J.K. Kasparov. You can set it so that, okay, this is only when white wins, and then you can search, or 1 second, all of the games he won with white. You gotta click the specific opening, Scotch. You can't go super specific, like there's no Scotch Gambit. It doesn't have a lot of really particular lines, but that's probably just for the sake of having this look clean. It still has a decent number of distinct lines. And then you click Find Chess Games. And then you have a pretty good collection of games here. You have Kasparov versus Karpov a couple of times, Nigel Short, Pickett, Arthur Yusupov. So you have a lot of games just from here that you can look at. Or you can just go to, for example, his profile. You can do this from the search bar on the homepage as well. And you can just look at all of his repertoire and be like, okay, maybe I want to see what he plays against let's see the Ruy Lopez. And you have all of these games at your disposal. And then you can, if you scroll down, filter, white wins, black wins, draws. And so we can use this to specify one player. And through that, you can pretty much guarantee you have a strong player. Like, of course, Kasparov, very, very great player. And so you can pretty much guarantee that these games will be high quality. And this is generally how I find them. I maybe go through chess.com, but when I'm looking for anchor games, I generally go through this kind of process. And one thing you can do that I generally like doing is when I'm looking for a master game, even though I already know it's strong players, potentially they didn't play they didn't play the opening super well, or maybe they went for a plan that's not the best, because they're not perfect. Like, for example, if we go to this game right here, we can see that at this point, black's a bit better. Like, this is -1, and this is somewhat early. This is move 13. And so we can see that maybe Abdusattorov misplayed this a little bit, and then his opponent blundered at the end. And so even though this is a win from a strong player, like it's a bit of a shaky win. Whereas, like, if I go here, I actually had a game that I was looking at before. For example, Korchnoi. When I go to his profile, one opening I play is the Queen's Indian. And we click on this game. Yeah, when you click on a game, what you can do is you can go down here and you can get the PGN, just click view, copy all of this, go into Lichess, and under tools you can import a game. You can just paste this in, request computer analysis. And now one thing that's important is when I'm looking at an anchor game, I want to be able to like analyze it by myself with fresh eyes before looking at what the engine thinks on every move. And so I'm purely looking at this to see the graph. I'm not going to check which moves are accurate, which moves are inaccurate. I'm going to click this immediately, and I scroll down, and I like, okay, this game is also not necessarily the best. So even like it seems like but this is pretty decent. But then it seems like his opponent gained an advantage and then blundered again. So I'd go, okay, maybe not that game. Let's keep going back. Let's pick another game where he wins. Maybe this game right here against Gurevich. Again, do the same thing. View, copy. I can just go back, paste the game in, request computer analysis. I'm hiding the moves so that I don't see which are good, which are bad. And I scroll down, and this graph looks pretty good to me. This advantage for white, like this, it gets the highest it gets is like plus 0.5-ish, which isn't actually like a significant advantage when you're playing with white. Like some white openings you'll get that immediately. And then we can see that it's pretty steadily downhill from here. Like maybe he played inaccurately later on move like 30 something, so that's well past the opening, and then he gets a win. And so we can see that this could be a very good candidate for an anchor game, simply because he played the opening pretty smoothly and then just got an advantage later on and ended up winning the game. And so I'd use a game like this and I'd just go through it steadily. And I kind of wanted to show what that looks like using a game that I played and actually the anchor game that it was modeled after. I'm going to close some tabs just because I don't want my computer to lag too much. This one is this one. Alright, so this opening is the Bishop G5 Nimzo. I have the study with a few anchor games, but this is the main one that I thought would be nice to look at. and it's from this position. And this is I pasted in a tournament game that I played. I just removed the names so that it's anonymous, and I was playing as black, and we can see it's the same position. And then h6, bishop moves back, c5, d5, d6, and I'm just remembering the moves. And I'm not really thinking of the theory necessarily. Like, I didn't sit down and memorize the theory like, okay, c5, then d6, then e5. This isn't something or not e5. This isn't something that I drilled. This is just me going over this game a few times. And when you go over a game in an opening and you just focus on that and you really analyze that as like the correct thing to do, what I find is you don't really play other things. Like in my brain, for example, the move, or not there, which move would I say? Like the move castles here wasn't really on my radar at all. And the reason is just because I was looking at this game and I was like, yeah, that's not the correct thing to do. And so I'm cutting down on first how much time I need to be spending in the opening, because I already have a sense of where my pieces are supposed to go from looking at this game, the anchor game, and I'm just copying the moves. And so I wrote a note here about it, one of the general ideas behind the opening that I noticed. You can see e3. I made a note of something move order wise that I thought was interesting, which is this bishop takes c3. And I thought, okay, this is a pretty significant thing. You don't usually take here at this point. And so I made a note of it. And then I see, okay, e5, and then e4. And okay, this is the structure that I'm aiming for. And one important thing is you don't just kind of take it at face value, like, okay, play e4 here and everything's good. You want to at least check that things work. Like, for example, I have to check, okay, if bishop e4, then I play g5. And then I win the bishop. Or, okay, but what if takes here first? Then I can take back. Oh, and then if capture is queen here, you can't block because of this. And equal material, your king's very weak. This is falling, actually. And so this, I'm like, perfectly good for black. All right, I understand now. And this is also something that a general tactical motif that I can keep in mind for the whole opening. Even if my opponent doesn't necessarily play bishop d3 here, as you'll see in my game, they actually played, if we just fast forward a little bit, in this position they played queen c2. And so here I could have played e4. Yeah, I could have played e4 here, but I played it safe with g5 just because, like, there's no reason to go for the specific move order. But yeah, and we can see actually in the game, after the bishop moves back, I identified this specific structure that was going to arise just so that this is something that I keep in mind, where this is what I'm aiming for. And then g5, I made a note about kind of the role of this bishop, how the bishop is locked out, how this bishop's pushed back. I see queen e7. And so as I keep going through the game, I'm making a note of where do my pieces go? What kind of things am I defending against? What kind of ideas does his opponent go for? What kind of ideas is he using? And so I'm just keeping all that in mind. We can see queen e7, and then when his opponent plays h4, he plays rook g8 and trades this way, just assessing that rook h6 isn't dangerous. And then plays knight d7, and we can see if we go to my game, after g5, e4, same structure, h4, I respond with rook g8, we trade, and then I go queen e7 when I can, a4, I respond with a5, this happens later in the game, and then I play knight d7, so still this structure is very similar. Now here, like, there's some slight deviations to what white is doing in this game versus my game, but that's just something I have to keep in mind. Either way, I'm still understanding that, okay, the general ideas stay the same. We can see how this knight serves a nice role. We can see how pieces are functioning. You can see, oh, queen defends here. And we have this nice idea, king d8. This is not an idea that I would ever find over the board. To be honest, I wouldn't find most things over the board. I wouldn't find this idea of like h6, g5, rook g8, Yeah, I wouldn't find this king walk, which you'll see that goes all the way to a7. And so we can see as the game progresses, there's the a4, a5. The king walks over here, rook a6. I saw this is a kind of an aggressive idea by my opponent trying to infiltrate. And I see, okay, this is how you respond with rook h6. I respond with rook a6. We go back to my game. We see rook h6. I respond with rook a6. My opponent starts doing stuff on the queen side, and here my king goes on its nice walk, and I just keep walking all the way to a7. And we see in the actual game, exact same thing happens. Identical. If we look at the setups, like look at where black's pieces are. All of them are the exact same place. Now, of course, I didn't come up with this over. I can't really come up with this over the board. This exact setup. This is something that I had to know beforehand, and this is why it's so useful to have an anchor game. Simply because I don't have to spend all this time worrying about where do my pieces go exactly. I don't have to spend a whole lot of time understanding, okay, what are the plans and ideas. This is already work that's been done for me. Like I can just look at what the master did, in this case Karpov, and replicate that. Of course, there's slight modifications as we're gonna see going forward. Like here, queen b3, knight g4. In my game, for example, like knight g4 is not possible. But the general idea of why you play knight g4, I understood, is we're playing f5, and we're kind of pressing on the king side now. White can't really do a whole lot about that. When we go in my game, I played queen f8, then knight e8, and then f5. And so again, we can compare. Like really, the only difference is my queen's here and my knight's here, or on e8. And white's position pretty much similar, like almost identical. Now in this game, there's some slight differences. There's king d1, didn't happen in my game. Karpov trades off a pair of rooks and then plays b6, so the knight controls here, and you're opening up the bishop. Whereas in my game, we can see that didn't really happen. I brought my knights back in. Like at this point, I'm completely on my own, but from here, I'm still feeling quite comfortable. And I understood up until this point where I'm supposed to play, how I'm supposed to go about things, and continuing to go forward, I understand, okay, my plan is to like play f4, maybe get some pressure over here on this pawn, which can be a bit tender, and some play on the king side. Like, but for example, how did I know that this could be a bit tender? If we go to this game, bishop a6, he's putting pressure, and then we can see knight e5 could come in, and then maybe this pawn's falling, or at least black or white might have to allocate an extra piece to defending this, which you don't really want to do. You don't want to have your queen and your bishop staring into your pawn. And so, like, I'm just taking some ideas and I'm repurposing them. Where here, in this case, my opponent made a blunder, but like I'm just gonna play knight e5 either way, and I'm gonna put pressure here. I can maybe activate my bishop, and so I'm still borrowing a bunch of ideas from the game. And we can see, actually, something I didn't mention is I moved my knight back to here, but then I ended up still going back to g4 because I realized, okay, this is a strong square for the knight, and I remember that the knight was on g4 from the Karpov game. I didn't remember literally everything. There are a bunch of details that I missed. During the game, I kind of had a sense that this was weak, but I didn't remember the b6 bishop a6 idea. I was just like, I'll keep the construction solid as you. I just kept this pretty solid and static, but I'm still just borrowing a lot of ideas while still being able to put in some of the work. I put in all of the work, to be honest, when it comes to actually calculating things during the game and making sure the ideas worked, and really being able to compare the positions that I faced here versus what happened in the game. So that still takes a lot of effort. It's not like you're gonna just play like a grandmaster every game now. Okay, I just looked at one model game, I'm gonna be perfect. You still have to put in the work, but this is giving a really important blueprint. And we can see here, my opponent blundered, this rook's trapped, and a little bit after that, I just kind of cleaned up. This is just, at this point, it's already too much. I'm up the exchange. My queen and my rook are coming in. This king's not safe. My king's quite safe. And so I ended up winning this pretty quickly and playing till almost checkmate. And if we look at this anchor game, we can see that the ending is somewhat different, where he played for f4 and the game just over here. But even though I didn't use this exact idea, I did end up playing f4 in a different context. If we look here, I ended up playing f4 in a different context, but I was still building to it, and that was what led to my opponent eventually making a mistake. And if we look at computer analysis, we can see here that this is a really like I love these kind of graphs where it's like I just was better from, or we were around equal in the opening, and then gradually I just started taking an advantage. And if we look back, actually around this point is the point where I was saying my setup and Karpov's setup were the exact same. If we go back, I forget where that happened. Is it here? Or when the king goes here? Yeah, here. These setups are identical. And if we look at my position, this is a setup that I had in mind from the beginning. -1. Already I'm comfortably better. And this position isn't even that easy to play for white. And so we can also see that my opponent didn't play badly. My opponent was like a 2000 rated player. They made like 1 inaccuracy. This was, computer says this is an accuracy, but it's not really that significant. It's still minus 1.1. Another inaccuracy, another inaccuracy, another one. But we can see how my opponent's not blundering. They're not playing badly. It's not like, oh, I like steamrolled them or anything. But having this idea of my plan and what I'm going to play beforehand is just that important and that helpful when it comes to actually playing a game. And yeah, computer gives, it says I had 1 blunder because it gave us both a blunder because I missed a forced checkmate by playing this move. Yeah, unfortunate that I missed forced checkmate, and really I gotta be seeing these. But but yeah, that's pretty much it for me. I figured that this is something I wanted to do for a while, but I only played this game like a couple weeks ago, and so I didn't have any good examples of how you actually put the anchor game to use. And I understand that for the most part it won't be necessarily as clear cut as this, but I do think it's quite important to still go through master games and actually see the specific plans of your opening and how a strong player actually plays these things, because you can't just figure this out by yourself. Unless you're already a GM, for some reason, you're one of like the 20 people watching this video, and you and you're like, well, I can figure this out over the board. But yeah, I feel like everyone could stand to benefit from practicing this kind of thing, where you're looking through master games, making sure you understand ideas, getting exposed to how strong players do things, their technique, how they convert advantages, how they play on different sides of the board, all these kinds of things that you won't just see by analyzing your own games. I feel like this stuff is really important and quite useful. But yeah, that's pretty much it for me. I've been thinking about doing more of this less edited, long form content, because I have a bunch of chess stuff that I feel like is important to share, in the sense of could be very useful for people wanting to learn chess, whether you're beginner, intermediate, anything. And so I figured it might be useful not only for me to get my thoughts out, but for people to actually hear. Hopefully you found something helpful from this video. If you liked it, then you should scroll on down and checkmate that subscribe. No, I was thinking about doing this, but it actually sounds trash. Checkmate the subscribe button. Yeah, but I'll work on that. But yeah, I hope to be recording and releasing a lot more content in the coming weeks and months, so stay tuned for that. And yeah, that's pretty much it.